Did you know that the Arctic Ocean didn't always look like this? During my PhD and my early postdoc, I went every year to the Arctic Ocean to study how the tiny algae growing in the sea ice and in the water below it were changing due to climate change. And I was thinking that maybe when the ice was going to melt, the entire Arctic would turn green because this algae would flourish. Turns out, the Arctic had already done that. 49 million years ago, when the dinosaurs were extinct, our planet looked very different to what it looks today. The average temperature was around 16 degrees, much higher than today, and the Arctic Ocean was actually a closed sea with a freshwater lens on top of it. And there was one little plant, a sola, that was covering the entire Arctic Ocean, growing like crazy. And it grew and it sank to the bottom, and it grew and it sank to the bottom for 800,000 years, sequestering carbon with it. Now, it sequestered so much carbon that it actually changed our climate. Yes, a tiny little plant did that. And it actually cooled the temperature so much that it brought us to the range of temperatures that are comfortable for us human beings. So we started thriving thanks to that change in climate. Now, while this algae was sinking to the bottom, it not only sequestered a lot of carbon with it, but it created what we now know as fossil fuels, oil. Oil is nothing more than plants and algae that died many million years ago and were stored at the seafloor or below the crust and were transformed into oil. Now, what we did as humans was, when the Industrial Revolution started, we started getting all those fossil fuels and we started burning them very, very quickly, which of course led to an increase in PCO2 concentrations in the atmosphere and its consequent increase in global temperatures. Now, the effects of that increase in global temperature are well known by all of you. We're in the middle of a climate crisis, and it's only getting worse. Now, we need to do two things to stop this climate crisis. One, avoid emissions. Order of magnitude, 37 gigatons of emissions per year. So we need to move away from fossil fuels. But we still need to fuel our society. So we need carbon sources that are created in a regenerative and sustainable way. We also need to sequester CO2 actively from the atmosphere, because we've already put too much up there that we have to remove. So we need to develop carbon dioxide removal approaches to remove between 5 and 10 gigatons of CO2 per year if we want to avoid the worst effects of climate change. Now, what if I would tell you that the planet is already doing something on its own? There's an algae, two species of sargasso, which is a brown golden macroalgae, that have escaped their natural habitat in the Sargasso Sea and are now growing throughout the entire subtropical Atlantic, creating what we now know as the Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt. It's so large that you can even see it from space with satellites, but no one has really quantified how much carbon it's taking and how much it's contributing to mitigating climate change right now. Now, when I saw this, together with my colleagues, we thought, hey, what if we could domesticate this algae and use this nature-based solution that the planet is already offering us to actually mitigate the effects of climate change? Pelagic sargassum is a wonderful algae. It's, of course, my favorite algae. It's very, very efficient at carbon sequestration because it grows very fast. It can double its biomass in 2 weeks, and it doesn't require a lot of nutrients to do so. And also, completely different to other macroalgae, it doesn't require a hard substrate to grow. It grows floating its entire life, and it can grow almost anywhere in the ocean. So the scalability of this approach is huge. Now, in 2023, I led the first team of scientists and entrepreneurs in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the Caribbean to do the very first pilot study to see how we could cultivate this algae inside an aquafarm. And what we could see is that actually the algae, while it was in the aquafarm, was sequestering a lot of carbon, 2.6 kilograms of carbon per square meter per year, which, if you remember, is about double of what Azolla was doing in the Arctic. And it's about 10 times more than most land crops. So very promising approach. Now, once the algae has grown and absorbed the CO2 and it has it in its biomass, the carbon, what should we do with it? There are several options. We could, of course, sink it, mimicking what happens in nature, and then it would be stored for millions of years, and eventually it would become fossil fuels in many, many years. But we could also take it and create products from it. So we could try to transform it into products that would substitute fossil fuels and plastics, for example. Now, in order to reach the scale that we need to substitute fossil fuels, it's not enough with growing these seaweeds in the coast. The coasts are already full of other things that we do there, right? So we need to go offshore. And if we go offshore to the middle of the ocean, we might need to bring some nutrients from the deeper waters using technology like artificial upwelling. So if we look at the world map, these are the areas in pink where sargassum could grow nowadays with the existing nutrient and temperature conditions. But we could expand those areas. You can see them in green, doing artificial upwelling. So the extensions where you could cultivate and grow sargassum are huge. Now, to give you an example, if we would want to sequester 1 gigaton of CO2 per year, which is like 1/10 of what we actually need to be doing, we would need 83,000 square kilometers. That's about the size of Portugal. It might seem like a lot, but think about this. If we would want to sequester 1 gigaton of CO2 with mangroves, we would need 10 times more space than that. So it's actually a very space-efficient approach for carbon sequestration. Now, when I did all the math and I realized the potential of this approach, I thought, okay, I have to move from my researcher, academic position into a position where I can implement this in the real world. And that's when I dared to create my own company that is called Macrocarbon, and we established the first and biggest sargassum aquafarm to date in the subtropical Atlantic. This is our aquafarm in the Canary Islands, on the island of Gran Canaria, and it's currently operating. And you can see here how it looks like, and we're of course continuously developing new methods to keep it growing, to make it grow better, to harvest it better, etc., etc. So this is the beginning of a journey. It's like when in the early days, the first humans were trying to cultivate weed on land. That's the status at the moment. We're starting to learn how to cultivate this crop in the ocean. The idea behind Macrocarbon is to then use modular, very efficient processing plants to create a source of energy that is locally produced and that is sustainable and renewable. So we're aiming to transform the biomass into biofuels. We can do different types of biofuels. We can do sustainable aviation fuel for planes so that we can all travel without feeling guilty for doing so. We can also do gasoline and diesel for cars, although I think electric cars would be a better solution. We can do marine biodiesel for boats, and we can also do bionaphtha for plastics. So we can actually, with this approach, move away finally from fossil fuels. As a side product, we would get biochar, for example, which is sequestering part of that carbon that was sequestered in the biomass permanently. So the whole approach in total is actually not only carbon neutral, but carbon negative. Now, how does it work a little bit more in detail? We cultivate our seaweed in the ocean, and it's absorbing CO2. Then we harvest it, and the first thing we need to do is extract the water, because a lot of the biomass in the algae is water. With that water that has some nutrients and organic carbon, we create biostimulant, which can be used to enhance crops on land, so we help agriculture. With the biomass that is left from that, we dry it. We can mix it with other sources of waste, like sludge, like agricultural waste, etc. And we put it into a gasification via pyrolysis, which is kind of like burning, but without oxygen and in a vacuum, okay? From that, we have the biochar that comes out, sequestering part of the carbon, and we then get synthetic gas. And what we do with that gas is, from the methane in that gas, we separate the carbon from the hydrogen. Why? Because we need a very enriched hydrogen mix to then create the liquid hydrocarbons. Other approaches need to have an external source of hydrogen, which is usually not the cleanest because green hydrogen is tricky to get. We have our own hydrogen in the system already. And with that, we put it into a gas-to-liquid conversion machine using Fischer-Tropsch technology, which is a German technology, and we create our sustainable hydrocarbons. Just as an example, from 1 ton of dried seaweed biomass, we can create between 150 and 180 kilos of any given sustainable fuel. Now, the other beautiful co-benefit of this is an enhance of biodiversity and abundance of marine life in our aquafarms. There's always a beautiful carpet of golden seaweed floating at the surface, and that is turning into a habitat for diverse marine organisms. So not only the method is carbon negative, it's actively sequestering carbon, and it's not only also substituting fossil fuels, but it's also protecting our oceans and creating safe havens for marine life. So I welcome you all to imagine a future in which parts of the ocean are actually golden, and we have managed to defossilize our industry, and we're not dependent anymore on imported oil, and we all live in a healthier and stable climate for all of us. Thank you.